And we're off. Okay, my name is Scott Edwards. I would like to thank everybody for coming. This is our third backyard birding presentation here. And I'd like to go through some of what we talk about when we do feed the birds in our backyards and make you familiar with some of our backyard friends. I've written a couple of books, several magazine articles, and I was the online website host for Peterson Live when they had their own website, so I answered all the questions there. I also wrote for Wild Bird magazine and Birders World. It's now Bird Watching magazine. Anybody know who this guy is? The male house finch. This is the bird around here that if you can't attract this bird to your yard, you can't attract birds to your yard. We call them hog finch because they absolutely eat their weight in seed every day. And one of the neat things about birds that I've always really liked is that you can tell a lot about birds and how they live and what they do by their beaks, the shape of their beak. Finch in general have a large, conical, heavy, seed-cracking beak. This is Mrs. House Finch. Check out her beak. Same beak. And for obvious reasons, most of the time the female is going to be duller colored than the male, so she has nest security. Everybody's favorite. Anybody notice anything similar? Yeah. Cardinal's nothing but a big finch. He's a big finch. And please note what this feeder is filled with. There is no mix in that feeder. This is Birdfeeder Gold. Black oil sunflower seed is eaten by more birds than everything else put together. So in a feeder like this, black oil is the seed of choice, even for his lovely bride. The female cardinal, even though she's got that bright orange honking beak, it's amazing how they can hide. The breakup of the tans and the oranges and the black face, they just disappear into a shrubbery. Can anybody tell me if this is a male or female blue jay? The answer is no. There are certain birds you can't tell. The plumages are identical between male and female. This was, Jim and I were just talking about this little part of the picture. Blue jays somehow, some way, have learned to love peanuts in the shell. There's no peanut farms around here. Blue jays don't live where peanuts grow because peanuts grow underground. But somehow they have developed an unbelievable taste for them, number one. Number two, once they get used to eating them, they actually weigh them. A blue jay will pick up a peanut, and you'll see him bob his head a couple of times, and then put it down, pick up another one, do the same thing. He's trying to determine whether or not it's worth opening or not. If he gets one of the ones with 3 in it, he's a happy camper. In Georgia, yeah, but the peanuts do grow underground, so how they became a food source for a blue jay in Pennsylvania, I have no idea. People always ask me, should I feed birds in the summer? Well, if you don't, you miss the American goldfinch. This is the male who is starting to look like this now. Give him another 2 or 3 weeks, the males will be all this bright yellow with the black hat. The female's kind of like that color right there. She's still got the black wing, and she's still got the wing bar, but she lacks the black hat and the bright yellow coloring. And no backyard is complete without chickadees. Now, around here, we only have one kind of chickadee, but if you drive about 15, 20 minutes north of here, you get 2. Anybody know what kind of chickadee we have here? We have Carolina chickadees. You go north of Philadelphia, you get both. And the black-cap chickadee under here, his neckline is nowhere near as clean, and he's got this very, very clean hockey stick on his wing. He's also much larger. He's about the size of a tufted titmouse. Speaking of which, one of my favorite backyard birds, they just don't ever stop. The chickadees and the titmice, I call them hit and run feeders. Why? Look at their beak. There and there. They're not heavy seed cracking beaks. What these guys have to do is they have to grab a seed, put it between their feet, and hammer it open. They're what we call a secondary cavity nester, but they can help excavate a hole to make a nest in a tree because their beaks are very pointed and very sharp, almost like a woodpecker's. So if you go finch, woodpecker, there's a gap in the middle of the evolutionary tree. Might be these guys. Speaking of woodpeckers, I like to think that the red-bellied woodpecker is one of the ones that got me hooked. First time I ever saw this bird, I was just blown away. And it was 35, 40 years ago. And his name is proper. He is a red-bellied woodpecker. In breeding plumage, his whole belly gets this blush of red over it. And the name red-headed was taken. This is a male because the red goes all the way to the base of the beak. The female, the red stops about there. And if you notice right here, it's his tongue, which goes down his throat, around his head, and is attached behind one of his eyes. Woodpeckers are feathered anteaters. So what he'll do is he'll lift up that bark and snake his tongue in there and come out with all the bugs behind the bark.
I heard that long tongue also helps protect their brain.
Well, actually, no. Their skull is padded with like a gel foam.
Oh, okay.
They're actually looking at woodpecker skulls in the design of football helmets to prevent concussion. They're trying to find out what that energy-absorbing material is, because if you've ever seen a woodpecker dig, he should have a concussion and a hell of a headache every single time he does it. But there is a layer between his skull and his brain of a shock-absorbing material. And trust me, they're looking at it in this developing of better football helmets to prevent concussions. Here's the downy woodpecker. This is the male because of the red patch. Female does not have it. She's just black and white in the back. But look at her beak. Not too much longer than a chickadee's or a titmouse. We also have this bird's first cousin, the hairy woodpecker. One of the questions I get all the time is how do I tell the difference between the two? Their markings are virtually identical. At distance, you really can't tell that this is a much larger woodpecker. He's almost the size of a red belly. However, at distance, you can still do this. If you put your finger on the beak and you push it back, it's going to hit him in the back of the head, if not come out the back. His beak is that long. If you do that to a downy, it's not even going to make it past his eye. He's got a much more delicate beak than the hairy does. The hairy's got that big pounding beak like a red belly. Wintertime visitor that we're not going to see very much longer right now is a white-throated sparrow. These guys get their name obviously from their white throat, and the easily identifiable yellow, what they call lories, the yellow spots behind his beak. These guys are ground feeders. They're the ones that will eat the millet, the little white pearly stuff, that you just throw it on the ground and they'll be more than happy to scarf it up. They don't like sitting on feeders very much. Perches like on this one are not going to make a whitethroat very happy. You rarely see them up off the ground. This will do your finch, your chickadees, your titmice, anybody like that. And again, should only be filled with black oil sunflower seed. Another ground feeder, mourning dove, with the absolute weakest beak of anybody going. Doves in general. People say, oh, I don't want to feed the doves. I don't want to feed pigeons. What can I put out there that they won't eat? The answer is nothing. If they can get it down their throat, they're eating it because they swallow everything whole. And their crop grinds it up. So they're not eating, they don't taste the way other birds do. They don't have a seed preference. They're taking small stuff because it's easy to get into that very, very small beak. Another winter visitor, the dark-eyed or slate-colored juncos, is another sparrow. Again, ground feeders. However, this winter was so bad that I actually saw juncos on Niger feeders, eating the thistle that we put out for goldfinch. These guys were actually sitting on perches. You know it's bad when it's snowing that hard that everything on the ground's covered, that these guys are on a perch. And if your backyard is really popular, anybody can identify this bird?
Toby?
Very good. This used to be called, many years ago, the rufous-sided towhee for his rufous-colored siding. The American Ornithological Union decided that he is now the eastern towhee, so they had to redo all the books. I just think the AOU does it to keep themselves jobs. Every now and then they'll lump birds together. When I had my store a few years ago, they actually took the Bullock's Oriole and the Baltimore Oriole and made them one bird. So everybody's life list was -1 the next morning. You went to bed with this many, you woke up the next morning with one less. However, since then and the advances in DNA, they've realized that they are two different species. The worst thing a bird can do is mate with another bird of a quote-unquote different species, because all of a sudden, oh, you must be related. Matter of fact, you might be the same bird. Not always so. But this is a really good sign that you have great habitat in your backyard. Towhees are very, very shy. They're the largest sparrow around here, believe it or not, because he is related to the junco and the white-throated sparrow and the chipping sparrow. Great sign that you're doing something right in your yard. Another sign we're seeing far too often these days is this one. For sale, 2 commercial lots. Look at all that great habitat back there. Grassland for the towhees and bluebirds and things like that. This is prime bird habitat. But then we see the cranes come in, they're taking down the trees, and followed by the bulldozers taking off all the topsoil, because that's how they build now. Not only do they take down all the trees and sell the lumber, they remove all the topsoil and sell that for screening as well. So they go and they build a house that looks like that, and they'll plant a few saplings, and maybe in 25, 30 years they might have a tree. Not only is this not a very habitat-friendly house, this is also an energy inefficient house. There's no trees, no hedges, no nothing to either offer shade or break winter winds. This place would have been so cold this winter. So much colder than a house that had shrubbery around it. Birds and all living things have 4 basic needs: food, water, shelter, and habitat. And we can provide all 4 of them very easily. The first and easiest of these is food. And this picture I happen to like because it's in my backyard. This is the Yankee Whipper. It's a takeoff on the Yankee Flipper, the one that had the motor in it. Only this one, the perches just drop under very heavy birds and squirrels. And the feeder itself is too long for the squirrel to hang here and reach the ports. So he really is not going to be able to eat through this. This is Lexan, what they make bulletproof glass out of, and this is zinc chromate bottom, so he's not going to chew that up either. So these are pretty much forever feeders. It's one of my favorites. And I like it because the perches actually face the hole. Cardinals have really, really huge feet, and they need to face their food head on. If they don't face their food head on, they have a really hard time turning. See how he's sitting on it? He's facing the port. Great way to know it's a cardinal feeder. If he can face his food, you have a better chance of getting cardinals on it. He's a big bird with no neck. The second is shelter, nesting box. Anybody know who that is? It's a house wren. House wrens are not here yet, and they're about yay big. And whenever you see a house wren fly, doesn't look like he's going to make it, because he has got the shortest, stubbiest little wings, and it's really comical to watch them fly. But you see this twig he's got in his mouth? He's going to get that twig through that 1-inch hole, and he's going to make over 800 trips of 1 twig each to build a nest that the female may reject. He will build it, she'll either use it or not. So the mom has final say. No, I don't like this house, buy me a new one. And he'll go do it again, and again, and again. And as we were talking about earlier, wrens, because they're such small birds, cut down on competition in a nesting area by building dummy nests. If there's more than 1 box like this around, he'll fill it up with more sticks to keep somebody else from nesting there. But each one of those sticks represents 1 trip. He doesn't bring 3 or 4. He's not big enough. He's barely 2 inches long. Also, the other thing I want you to notice on this box, it ain't painted. When in doubt, err on the side of safety for the birds. Yes, you can paint nesting boxes, but it's best to use water-based paints and not paint the inside. So you don't want the box to get hot and the smell of the paint have an ill effect on the birds inside. And if you've ever been inside a freshly painted room on a hot day, it still stinks to paint. And we were talking about baby blue jays. The third thing everybody needs is water. These are two fledgling blue jays sitting on a terracotta bird bath, deciding who's going to get to bathe first. Only robins bathe with more fun than blue jays. But they will come to it, and open water, now that winter's over, is available, so it's a very easy thing to do. In the wintertime, it's just as important, because every time a bird exhales, he's exhaling moisture. He's going to dehydrate. Open water is brutally necessary in winter, and no, they cannot eat snow. It will drop their core temperature too much, too fast, and they will not survive. It could actually kill them. And the fourth is habitat. This is just a big brush pile in somebody's backyard. But look, there are little berries in there. All those branches, that's nesting opportunity. All that crisscross stuff, that's cover from predators. Habitat is just a fancy name for a place to live where birds can get most of what they need to survive. Even neglecting a small part of your backyard, letting it go wild. Stop mowing 10 feet from the back. Let it go. You never know what's going to pop up. Throw a bird bath in it, you got great bird habitat. A brush pile. Every time a limb falls down, tree falls over, Christmas tree, throw it in and out back. Make a pile. The towhees and the sparrows will absolutely love this. They will actually build nests in there. And again, cover from predators, because we do have birds that eat birds in this area. Even ornamental shrubs can offer food and nesting opportunities. These tall trees here offer great protection from the wind and great nesting opportunities. The birds will go inside beyond the edge and build close to the trunk so nobody can get to them. And of course, fruit-bearing shrubs are highly attractive. Anybody tell me who that is? It's a cedar waxwing. Cedar waxwings are due here within the next few weeks. And they will find the trees that held their berries all winter long, and they'll land en masse in the tree and completely and totally strip it bare in 20 minutes. And what's really cool is they pass them down the line so that the bird at the edge of the branch gets one first, and then down, and they keep doing it. They keep passing berries. But I had pyracantha over my bird bath, and they actually stripped it in a half an hour. There wasn't a berry left. And beautiful flowers can attract hummingbirds. It's almost hummingbird season, believe it or not. Despite the weather out there now, I always recommend April 15th. It's a bad day. It's because it's tax day. It's the day you put out your hummingbird feeders. Birds need water, especially in winter. Here you see a heated bird bath. There's a heating element in the bottom of this plastic tray. And no, we're not providing them a hot tub. That water is just above freezing. It's only keeping it open, and it is thermostatically controlled. So if it's warm, it's going to turn off. If it's going to freeze, it's going to click back on. You don't even notice them on your electrical. Been using one for years. And you never know who's going to stop by if you offer water. Aquascaping is becoming very, very popular. There are plenty of pond companies in the Delaware Valley now who will install something like this, or it's a great do-it-yourself project. It's not hard to do. They sell the liners and the tubs and everything like that. Pumps, they're a great, great, great resource for birds and other critters in your backyard. You can take a regular bird bath and add movement with a dripper. This line connects to your outdoor water faucet, and it's got a little needle valve on it so you can adjust the drip rate. If you do it to about a drip a second, you won't even use a gallon of water in 2 days. It's that, but it makes ripples, and the birds see it. Not only that, it breaks up the surface tension no mosquitoes, so you don't have to deal with the standing water. Another one, just like it, is the mister. Again, needle valve on it to control the flow rate. Water, I like to use a mister in a bird bath that's under a bush, so it gets the leaves all wet. The birds can see the shiny wet leaves from a distance. And there are birds also that leaf bathe. They actually rub up against wet leaves to get clean, because clean feathers, A, fly better, and B, insulate better. It's kind of like you having a down comforter that you haven't washed in years. Not as warm as it. You gotta get that loft back, because down's feathers. This is your standard hopper feeder. Well, there's nothing standard about this one anymore. For years they were made out of wood, usually cedar. This one is made out of recycled milk jugs. It will outlast all of us put together. It has the half-life of uranium-238. Again, please notice what it's filled with. Black oil sunflower. More birds eat that than the rest of it put together. Birds are baby oil burners. They do not get a lot of nutrition out of birdseed. They don't. What they get out of it is calories to burn, to either keep warm or get their day started so they can forage. Studies have shown that they get about 10 to 15% of their daily caloric intake from a bird feeder. Doesn't look like it when they're going to town on it, but that's all that they get. That's how fast their metabolism is. On the side of this one here, you'll see 2 suet cages. Great way to increase variety to feeder, because some birds will land right here and eat off the side of it. The woodpeckers, the chickadees, and the nuthatches will grab right onto the cage. My favorite kind of feeder is a platform or a fly-through feeder. There's no dispensing mechanism. Just dump whatever you want on the bottom of it and let them have at it. On this feeder, I have male orioles, female rose-breasted grosbeak, and male rose-breasted grosbeaks. Why? Because they don't have to worry about which way they have to fly in or out. You can put whatever you want. This is a great place for the peanuts in the shell. Almonds, orange halves, anything like that. I like to feed raisins too. But what I do with raisins is I take the box, put it in a bowl, fill it with warm water, and let them plump back up overnight. They like them better that way. They don't recognize a dried up raisin as food. Some birds prefer eating on the ground. Like I said, cardinals have big feet and no necks. It's easier for them to get their seed off the ground, perfectly honest with you. That's why they have to face their food. Unfortunately, in the suburbs today, it's also very dangerous. The #1 predator of birds is the domestic cat. And that is not natural. There is nothing natural about it at all, because before the Europeanification of the North American continent, there was no equivalent to the domestic cat. Birds had no defense mechanism against this animal because they'd never seen one before. They had no clue. It's like us being invaded by aliens with death rays or something. This is a new predator that just is not in their skill set. If you want to feed the birds and you don't want them on the ground, put a tray on the bottom of the feeder. Almost every one of these feeders has a thread on the bottom that will take a tray. A, it'll make your cleanup easier, and B, you see the feeder's pretty tough, didn't break. And B, it will give the larger birds a place to land. So put a tray on the bottom, everybody's happier. And there are specialized tube feeders for dispensing Niger, or what we used to call, before we got politically correct, thistle. This is it. And if you pass it around, you can see that the holes in it are very, very, very small, because the seed is very, very, very small. It's not thistle. It is not from the thistle plant, and it's not going to grow thistle in your yard. Those big purple balls you see, that's bull thistle. And they use the down from that to line their nest, so they have a nice, soft, cushy nest. They don't eat the seeds. These Niger seeds are imported, and they have been heat sterilized. They cannot grow. I'll take that. Thank you. So they won't grow. So if it gets dumped in your yard, don't worry. Your yard is not going to be taken over by that big prickly plant. But goldfinch absolutely love it. They like sunflower better, but they like thistle, Niger, better than anybody else. And you can also just put a platform on the ground. This is how I like to ground feed, for the very simple reason is, A, I get to look at a certain spot. I don't have to keep scouring the yard. B, I can dump all the crap out of it easy. And C, it gets the seed up off the ground. The bottom of it is mesh. Seed stays dry. Air circulation is good for it. Doesn't get all moldy and nasty. And even the goldfinch and chickadees think it's a great idea. Okay, but we also want to be careful what we feed. I am not, you notice how I cut this off so you couldn't see whose birdseed mix this is? Look at the ingredients. First one is Milo. Milo is a strain of sorghum wheat that has been genetically modified to be bird-proof. They grew it so birds wouldn't eat it. But it's really, really, really cheap. So it's the first ingredient here. This isn't birdseed. Deluxe no corn birdseed. White millet, ground feeder food. Then we have regular wheat. When was the last time you saw a flock of chickadees in a wheat field? Doesn't happen. And then finally, we get the black oil sunflower. These ingredients are listed in order of appearance. There's more of the first one than anything else, and then in descending order from there. You can see that there is only 4% fat in this. Just told you that birds are baby oil burners. They need fat. If you look at the fat content on a good bird seed mix, it's going to have black oil sunflower in it. It's going to have peanuts in it. It's going to have all these things that are so rich in oil that the bird's metabolism is fueled that way. Suet. What is suet? Suet is the fat, again, that surrounds beef kidney. It's a very dense, very water-low fat. It doesn't freeze solid. Okay? People say, oh, I'll just put the trimmings from my steak out. No, there's too much water in that. It's going to freeze as solid as a rock. They're never going to eat it. Kidney suet is specifically from around the kidneys, and it's very, very dense and very, very dry. But it is such a great source of food for the birds. And even pileatids, which nest right back over here in Indian Orchard, is a pair. You have these guys right around here, and they're bigger than crows. And they will come to a tree-mounted suet feeder more likely than a hanging one because of their size. Woodpeckers' tail feathers are very, very stiff. They use them as props so that when they have something to push off of when they're either digging a hole or eating. Should you feed year-round? Absolutely. If you don't, you miss the goldfinch. Over there we have these upside-down Niger feeders. Niger is not a cheap seed, so people want to save it for these beautiful yellow birds. And no, they're not related to canaries at all. So they found that they're very acrobatic and that their feet hang very easily. So what they did is they moved the hole under the perch. And you'd be amazed at how fast they adapted to it. In a day, they went whoop, and there they were. Summertime is also hummer time. It's the only time you're going to see these guys. Now, these two are ruby-throated hummingbirds. How do I know that? Well, there's the male right there, and he's got a ruby throat. But there's a look-alike. And the hummingbird feeder companies are very, very, very clever. They always show you this huge feeder that holds a quart of nectar with like 80 birds all around it. Not around here. Those are broad-tailed hummingbirds out west who are communal by nature. They don't mind feeding together. Out in Colorado, yes,